Howdy, all you wonderful Camille's Harem watchers and listeners. Let's dive into the traumatizing world of solo leveling today. For those of you unfamiliar with solo leveling, it is the daddy of many of the apocalyptic video game like Korean webtoons that has come out. It came out, and the flood of copycat comics that came out afterwards is absolutely astounding. Started as a web novel, which then turned into a comic, and now finally, after years and years of waiting, is now become its own anime. I'm going to be honest, I am a fan of this comic. Any anime can be really good if it can stick with the original storyline for something that's already good. Lars has already talked a lot on this channel about the failures that the other webtoon-inspired anime became, and I agree with his worries that this one could fail too. When I started watching the anime though, I found myself perplexed and confused as to where the story started and introduced was a part of the story that comes a bit later. Found myself asking why they would choose to start the story with a depiction of the Jeju Island raid. Then, as the story begins to move forward, and we're introduced to Sunwoo, our main character, we're also getting introduced to a bunch of the other characters that play important roles later on in the story. I gotta be honest, the first episode of the anime has a lot to take in. There's a lot of world building that happens right from the start, and all of the character introductions are super short, because there's really not time to focus on one specific character other than our MC. We also don't really get that much of him either, for that matter. At first, I was kind of confused about the amount of scene shifts that kept happening throughout the first episode, but then after I got done watching the episode, it started to make sense from a writer's perspective. You have to understand that anime was made with multiple audiences in mind. Of course, there's going to be a lot of fans of the series that are there to see one of their favorite stories animated, but you're also going to have just as many, or possibly more people, who haven't interacted with this story before and are here because of the hype that the diehard fans have created for it. This is an opportunity for the story to reach new heights. Take, for example, another story that became more popular worldwide after the anime was created. That would be Demon Slayer, of course. I know so many people that will only watch the anime for it, as by their right, that is their preferred medium for that story, and I feel like if done right, solo leveling could level up the fan base of the new anime that is coming out. Still, not gonna stop me from messing with my friends who don't want to read ahead in the manga of Demon Slayer, as I get really vague about certain spoilers. Camille almost unalived me when I teasingly mentioned what might happen to Inosuke towards the end of that story. Having to create the story for multiple audience, though, requires the storyboard creators for this anime to be extra creative. There's a lot of stuff that needs to be explained super early on in the story for the significance of what's going to happen later to stand out. They have to explain the dungeon portals and adventures, and a very important fact about adventures is that they have a set level from when they gain their abilities. It's set in stone. That's why when Sunwoo gains the ability to level up, it's abnormal and sets him apart from the rest of the adventurers around him. I'm getting a little ahead of myself here, but it's a pretty important part of the setting, thus the name Solo Leveling. The first episode does something very interesting in my opinion. It knows that there's going to be a lot of exposition, and for the most part, instead of having a formless narrator give us the rundown, we're instead introduced to a bunch of the characters that will be important later. It might seem like we've got an old guy giving a Captain America talk to a bunch of newbie adventurers, but each one of those characters will have a role to play later in the story. We're also introduced to two of the ships in this episode too. Oh dear, this is going to start the ship wars again. I know my ship will never sell though, so I'll just have to have fun watching the other shippers fight. These scenes with all of the other characters pop in and out of the focus on Sunwoo, and it lightens the amount of exposition we're being forced to eat. Think about it like this. You sit down for a very large meal. You could just heap everything onto your plate and eat it all at once. All of the flavors kind of mesh into one, and at the end, the impression you get is kind of meh. Or you could break up your meal into separate courses with a way to cleanse your palate. This way, you get to gain a distinct impression of each individual meal item, and you could find what parts of the meal you like best and what parts you don't like. Even though the separate scenes that are introducing the world building and characters slows down the overall story, it is building a foundation that the anime can capitalize on later. Episode 1 is a narratively heavy episode, and with everything included, it felt longer than the standard 20 and some minutes that it fits into. To be honest, I'm impressed. I also like how it sets it up so we get the whole next episode to handle the Dungeon God arc. If I'm not traumatized again by the giant statues, then the animators weren't trying hard enough. Anyway, find us in all the places below and wish Lars the best because he's at the dentist today. Okini!